Hi, everyone. Dr. Shook here. I hope you're doing well today. What I want to do is, as part of our ongoing series, I want to discuss the connection between foods and autoimmunity today. This is going to be some information that most of you are probably not familiar with, and it is going to cover. It's going to cover. I'm going to really focus on one primary food and some of the components of the food that are not commonly it's not commonly understood or known how it contributes to autoimmunity, but some very significant connections here that most people have not heard. So I want to continue with that series. If you have any questions, post them in the comments, and I'll do my best to answer them when we're finished at the end. But I do appreciate everyone. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I want to do is a similar format to what we did before. Is we're just going to go through. I'm going to go through a presentation, and please feel free to comment here. But I'll try to answer those at the end. But I want to go through this without it being taking too long, and I want it to be something that you can use. So let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about this connection between autoimmunity and food, and this is a significant connection. This is a very significant connection between multiple tissue autoimmunity as well. So again, this information is what I'm going to discuss is informational in nature. So before you make any changes or you do anything, make sure you talk to your doctor. And what we're going to talk about today, now on our previous live stream, I discussed we're going to cover these different areas of environmentally induced autoimmunity. So on one of our previous videos, I discussed barrier breach, which I'm going to briefly review with you in this video. I really want to focus on environmental triggers, which are the things that we need to assess and determine to really help to try and unwind the process of autoimmunity. And the environmental triggers are foods, pathogens, and chemicals. Now today we're going to talk about foods. I'm going to talk about foods in greater detail in another video because there's just so much information. I don't want to be more overwhelming than this information already is. So to really get an in-depth review of the previous video that I did on the barrier system breach, it's a very important video to understand. Just go back to our Facebook live or our Facebook post, or go to our videos tab in Facebook. You can access them on our business page at the Office of Dr. Brad Shook. You can go to the Greater Hickory Thyroid Support Group. It's in there. You can go to YouTube. The video is on our YouTube page as well. So just look for this video with this thumbnail and you'll be set. So in the previous video on the barrier systems, I covered this slide. And basically what we talked about was that the intestinal lining is one of the body's barrier systems. When it breaks down or it becomes permeable, it lets things into the bloodstream that trigger an inflammatory response. And this is where you can start reacting to things that are in the GI tract, like different types of bacteria and foods that you're consuming. The food proteins can start leaking in, and then the immune system reacts to them because they're getting into the bloodstream in larger particles or peptides than should be there. We talked about the bacteria. There's different types of bacteria in the gut. Generally, there are two categories called gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria that we talk about. The gram-negative bacteria, we said, have this outer membrane that contains something called lipopolysaccharides. These things are incredibly inflammatory, and we can measure them in the blood. We can do antibody testing to determine if they're there. And we discussed and said that these things, when they get in the blood, these lipopolysaccharides, they're incredibly inflammatory, and they do a lot of things systemically to tissues. One of the things they do is they actually open one of your other barrier systems, in particular the blood-brain barrier, an incredibly important barrier that keeps things out of the brain from causing neurodegenerative processes and inflammatory processes from occurring in the brain. This process is associated with a number of different neurological problems. We know that neurological autoimmunity, that you have to have this blood-brain barrier opened for that autoimmunity to begin, for this response to occur. So it's one of the pathways for that process. We talked about how those lipopolysaccharides, which are represented on this graph in the center, the LPS, that they have impacts on cardiovascular disease, on the immune system regulatory function, on the liver health, on the brain, everything from depression to neurological autoimmunity, flares in multiple sclerosis. They have an impact on the lungs, and actually the air in some cities contain lipopolysaccharides that can open the lung barrier, because anything that's an outward-facing barrier to the world is basically one of your barrier systems. It's a selectively permeable system. Lipopolysaccharides also wreak havoc on your biochemistry, and they lead to metabolic disorders. So if you're talking about diabetes or problems with weight gain, it also affects the endocrine system. It affects the nervous system's signaling of the endocrine system. So the thyroid is very susceptible to these increases in these inflammatory chemicals, as are joints. The joints throughout your body are also susceptible to increased pain and conditions due to these lipopolysaccharides. When this occurs and these chemicals get into the body, they disrupt the gut-brain axis, as we call it. So the inflammation creates these problems with the brain. Then when the brain has increased inflammatory chemistry and it's not able to activate the nerves basically that control the gut, you get gut dysfunction. The gut dysfunction can lead to further inflammatory chemistry, which further can affect the brain, and then this vicious cycle ensues. So you have to figure out what's going on and unwind that process by trying to intervene in as many places as possible. There are many different causes for this: stress, bacterial imbalances in the gut, parasites, inflammation from loss of food tolerance, which we're getting ready to talk about, and then a lot of medications can do it. So that is the past video in a nutshell. Okay, so what we want to talk about now is the other circle of the factors that contribute to environmentally induced autoimmunity. So the first circle we talked about were the barrier systems. Okay, I just reviewed it. Now we're going to talk about these environmental triggers and things that can perpetuate the immune response. Okay, so we're going to talk about foods. We might break the foods down into two different videos. Okay, so this is part one. We're going to talk about foods and the loss of tolerance to the foods. Now, it's important to understand a few concepts. I'm not gonna belabor this point. I'm not gonna talk about it in great detail. I just want you to understand concepts. There are three major theories behind how autoimmunity develops. Number one is called molecular mimicry. Okay, I'm going to show you a diagram of it in a second, where something looks like something that your immune system is reacting to, whether it be a food, whether it be a pathogen like a bacteria, virus, or a parasite, or whether it be a chemical. It looks similar to your tissues, and your immune system cannot tell the foreign thing, the bacteria, let's say, from your tissues. So it attacks both of them because they look molecularly the same. That's called mimicry, molecular mimicry. Okay. There's another another theory called bystander activation. Now, these are all likely mechanisms. There's not just one mechanism, but bystander activation is where, let's say you get an infection, the infection penetrates the cells of your body, and your immune system recognizes the infection in the cell, so it attacks the tissues and destroys the tissues as well as the pathogen. Okay, so bystander, it's there, so it gets destroyed as well. Then there's cryptic antigens. Now, cryptic antigens are very similar to the bystander activation, but what that is when the pathogen gets in your cells and then the immune system can't detect it, but then eventually it does and it causes damage. So that's called a cryptic antigen. Now, what I want to show you, this is an illustration of molecular mimicry. Okay, so the orange arrow is thyroid tissue. Okay, the orange, six-sided object. I was just covering this with my son in homeschool. I should know this, right? Is that a pentagon? Or they think they have to be equal. Anyway, that represents gluten. Okay, so a gluten protein. So you notice how the blue thing is the same, right? It looks like Pac-Man, right? It's got this wedge open mouth. Well, those are antibodies. So the antibodies, so let's just say, as an example, the gluten gets into your bloodstream, larger proteins get in there, larger pieces of the gluten protein. Your immune system doesn't recognize it because it should be thoroughly broken down into its individual building blocks, which are called amino acids. But this gluten protein is partially digested. And you've got this leaky barrier system, this leaky gut, which we talked about, and these proteins are getting into the bloodstream before they should. The immune system doesn't recognize it, launches an attack or mobilizes immune cells, recognizes it as foreign or thinks it's foreign, and it makes antibodies against it. So these antibodies, they are designed to adhere or fit like a lock, like a key into a lock, okay, or fit together based on the shape of the gluten protein that was recognized. Well, other things in the body may have a similar shape to gluten protein. So like this example, the thyroid tissue has part of it is exactly the same as the gluten protein. So the antibody may be able to attach itself to the thyroid tissue or other tissues in the body because of the similarity, because of the molecular mimicry or the similarity in the molecule. Okay. So this is the concept. This is one of the leading theories on autoimmunity. And we see that this works out in laboratory studies as well. So it's not like it's a theory that holds no weight. There's lots of research that shows that this is a very viable mechanism, and we see that this works in clinical practice when we test for these types of processes, and then we work to remove them from the person's diet, for example, if it's foods. So this is molecular mimicry. Okay, this is the primary mechanism we're going to talk about with foods. Okay, we are going to talk about lectins, which are a component of gluten and other foods, and how they work, which is different than this, but that's okay. This is the primary thing I want you to focus on. Just think about this. Okay, so food protein peptide reactivity. Okay, so I just talked about what a food protein is like a chain. Imagine a chain with 10 links. Okay, a chain with 10 links. That would be a food protein. All right. Now, a peptide would be if you cut that chain in half and you've got half of the protein on each side, that would be a peptide. It's part of the full chain or the full protein. Now, each link in a protein is called an amino acid. Okay. What we want, what the way the body works is it should break down the enzymes in your digestive tract, should break down this protein into these individual links, these amino acids. Then they pass easily through an intact intestinal barrier because they're small enough. They get into the bloodstream and the body uses them for repair. When you have a permeable gut wall, leaky gut, and these proteins, as they're breaking down, they might be able to pass through into the bloodstream before they should. Okay, that's where this reactivity, this abnormal reaction to the foods occurs. Okay, so this can cause this process of what we call cross-reactivity, where the immune system reacts to the food and attaches to the tissues because of the similarity in the molecules, right? The molecular mimicry, it's similar. So the cross-reactivity is actually the process of the antibody that we talked about. Just showed you in the diagram, right? The antibody here, that blue thing attaching to the human tissues. Okay, so this is the process that we want to talk about. Now, the most common food that's been discussed and that most of you have heard about, and that there's a probably multiple billion-dollar industry around, is gluten. And it's important to understand that gluten, there's a reason that we talk about it as being a potential problem. And I'm just using gluten here because it's such a commonly discussed thing and so many people are familiar with it. And I bet you don't know the detail of gluten that I'm getting ready to share with you. And this is important because this is not just with gluten, it's with other foods, but gluten is highly researched. So let's talk about this and use this as an example, and also fill in some gaps that you may have, because I guarantee you a lot of you do not know what I'm going to share with you here, especially how gluten may contribute to autoimmunity to multiple tissues throughout the body, things like the ovaries, for example. So let's talk about this. It's the most commonly recognized immunologically reactive food. People have heard about it. And the thing is that there's just not one protein. There's actually a lot of different proteins in gluten that you can react to, or portions of the gluten protein. There are even things that are called opioid-like peptides that are byproducts when your body breaks down gluten that can cause drug-like withdrawals in people. We actually can test for those to see if people are developing that. But you wonder why people have such strong, some people have such strong addictions to gluten, and this also happens with casein, which is dairy protein. These things are called like gluteomorphin, for example. When you notice it sounds kind of like morphine, gluteomorphin. It's an opioid-like substance that can be can create very, very strong addictive addiction to the food itself. And then it also contains lectins. Now, like in particular, agglutinin is one of the non-gluten family proteins that we can test for. Now, I'm going to talk to you about how all these things are different, how they contribute to autoimmunity, and this is similar to other foods. It's why you need to understand that food reactivity can be very important to understand. It's not the only piece of the puzzle, because there are also pathogens and then there are also chemicals, but this is incredibly important to understand. So immunological reactivity to gluten we know that there's one disease in particular that is a full-blown autoimmune reaction to gluten that causes massive destruction of the small intestine lining, and that is celiac disease. And so there are some known enzymes in the body that when people have reactivity to gluten, they can have reactions to these enzymes, and they're very important throughout the body. So they're called transglutaminases. Okay, so transglutaminase 2 is the one that there's reactivity against when someone consumes gluten that has celiac disease, and it destroys the lining of the gut. Okay, it destroys that. So this is just one tissue, for example, that we know there's a direct connection to gluten. But there's also transglutaminase 3 and transglutaminase 6. Now, transglutaminase 3 is in the skin and the hair shaft follicles. So when people, the common presentation of this is called dermatitis herpetiformis. And this is where you'll typically see, it's usually on the hands and feet, but there can be little vesicles that pop up on the hands and the feet. And you will see this occurring in people that have eczema and psoriasis. So a lot of people don't typically associate eczema and psoriasis with gluten, but this could be occurring, driving these processes. There's also transglutaminase 6, which I would argue is probably the most significant one. And this is found in the brain and in the nervous system. So we're talking about neurological tissues. You'll see this with their diseases called diagnosis called gluten ataxia. So some people will have very severe reactions to gluten. It actually, instead of manifesting maybe in the gut of celiac or which people tend to think that that if they're having a reaction to a food, they're going to have a digestive problem. It's just not true. It's not true. That doesn't have to be the case at all. So you'll see things like neurological problems like gluten ataxia, schizophrenia, and also this has been associated and seen in cerebral palsy. So these are really very significant problems. And this has been associated in the literature. We see that these reactivities occur in some of these problems. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. Now, this was a paper that was published, and I'll post a link whenever the live stream's over. But this is gluten cross-reactivity with human tissues. Okay, this is a correlation of tissue antibodies and food immune reactivity in randomly selected patient specimens. This was Lambert and Vojdani. Dr. Vojdani is one of my biggest heroes. He's an immunologist and a person that is all of our advocates. He is someone that has been researching autoimmunity and is the kindest person. Every time I see him talk, he's one of those people that just exudes this kindness, and you just want to give him a hug. You know what I mean? He's a great guy. So this paper is open access. So you can actually, if you Google this, you can pull up the paper and read the full thing and look through it. It's absolutely amazing and enlightening. So they found, when they did this research, that gluten showed cross-reactivity. So if someone had a reaction to gluten, now remember, there are a lot of different ways that you can react to gluten. So you can't just check one gluten protein or wheat. There are many different ways you can react to wheat. So the typical standard testing will not work. It's insufficient. It's outdated. It's incomplete. Okay. Based on literature like this, you have to do very thorough testing. That's what we do for gluten. It's a very, very thorough test that looks at a lot of different ways you can react to this stuff. So high cross-reactivity with neurological tissues, with liver enzyme, with GAD65, which is an enzyme in the brain. That this is a really interesting one too, because we know, like GAD65, it's this enzyme that allows you to make GABA, which is a neurotransmitter, a brain chemical that actually calms you down. If you have reactivity against this, it can build up glutamate, which is very excitatory, which can make people anxious and nervous. So this is an incredibly important, these are some incredibly important tissues, obviously. 21 hydroxylase, which is adrenal glands. So actually, you could be eating gluten. If you're reacting to certain portions of the gluten protein, it may be contributing to autoimmunity against the adrenal glands. So how many people have like fatigue and issues where they appear to have these problems that maybe they wax and wane, maybe they come and go, but they have these problems where they just have no drive, no energy. Could it be a connection to to gluten? Well, it absolutely could be. I mean, really when the adrenal glands are destroyed from an autoimmune process, it's called Addison's disease. Okay, it's a really severe form of autoimmunity against the adrenals. It's a major problem. Myelin basic protein, which is the coating of the nerves, it's what's really reacted to with multiple sclerosis. Could be what there's been shown. The research shows cross-reactivity, high cross-reactivity, mind you, high cross-reactivity to certain portions of gluten protein and myelin basic protein. The cerebellum is the back part of the brain. Remember I mentioned gluten ataxia earlier? So gluten ataxia is ataxia means the inability to walk, stand, function. The cerebellum, the back part of the brain responsible for balance and posture and writing reflexes, and it's being attacked, and it can cause these problems. Osteocytes. So osteocytes produce your bone. Okay, so how many people are diagnosed with osteoporosis that may actually have loss of bone density because their osteocytes are being destroyed due to cross-reactivity with gluten? So they're consuming gluten, and that's causing this reactivity against their bone. So I hope these connections, you're making some of these connections like, wow, I cannot believe the depth of the connections with gluten, because it is that significant. Synapsin is what is between nerve cells. So the nerve cells of your body work by, they come real close to one another and they release chemicals from the end of one nerve cell to the next that allows signals to propagate from nerve to nerve to nerve. Well, synapsin is responsible for the release of those chemicals. So if you have autoimmunity that's destroying those, there's going to be some problems with nervous system. Myocardial peptide. So that's the heart. So heart autoimmunity. So heart disease is like one of the major killers, right? So these are significant. Ovary. Okay, so the ovary. So how could that be affecting hormone production, ability or inability to get pregnant? I mean, these are significant things that we cannot overlook. And then thyroid peroxidase, right? High cross-reactivity with TPO, which we know is the enzyme that's the primary target for people with Hashimoto's and thyroid problems. It's huge. It's huge. Now, moderate cross-reactivity, which means more mild, right? But it still can cross-react. Testes, so men. So if they're having problems with sperm, or you're trying to get pregnant, which I want to do a video on. I'm going to do a video. It's just prioritizing what I need to do on preconception, because I'm going to tell you right now, we're going to have a bunch of babies come out of this quarantine that's going on. It's just the reality of the situation, and you really need to be thinking smart about getting pregnant right now because of high stress levels, and you really need to prepare the body, especially men, because men, they'll place epigenetic marks on their sperm. Women, their eggs develop when they're actually in the womb of their mother. So it's more important for men even than women, but I digress. So the testes can cross-react. So you can have autoimmunity against the testes. So could low testosterone, could it be due to autoimmunity against the testes? What is happening? The islet cells. So pancreatic output, that's the pancreas. Parietal cells. So the production of stomach acidity. When I work with people that have thyroid autoimmunity, some of the common co-autoimmunities that we see with Hashimoto's is pernicious anemia, which is autoimmunity against the parietal cells that produce acid and intrinsic factor in the stomach. So it interferes with the absorption of B12. So these people, they have problems with anemia, with a particular type of anemia, and they often have very low capacity or diminished capacity to produce stomach acid. So this is also associated with gluten. And then intrinsic factor, which I just mentioned, intrinsic factor is produced in the stomach, and it is responsible for your body's ability to use and absorb B12. If you can't do that, then there's some major problems with the blood. You can't, the red blood cells can't mature, and you won't carry oxygen efficiently. This is how important, this is just gluten. Okay, this is just gluten and the different ways that it can be reacted against the body. This is incredibly important, and I want people to understand, because we want to minimize these things so much. And here's what we don't want to do. We don't want to overthink it, but at the same time, we want to be aware and make decisions that are in our best interest, right? We want to make conscious decisions about what's going on here. So when people tell you that, and this is not a gluten allergy, you can just have reactivity against the gluten in these different ways. I mean, the way that you really can test this is You can do a test that looks at the way that you react to gluten. I would do a few other food panels, and then you can do a multiple tissue antibody and see what antibodies, what tissues you're reacting against. And then you can have a really good idea as to could the foods that you're reacting to be contributing to human autoimmunity and tissue cross-reactivity. Okay, really great way to do it. Now, the thing, so that's really, I want you to understand food proteins. Other food proteins can do this too. I'm going to go into that in part 2, but I want to talk about other components of gluten and a lot of other foods, especially beans. I'm going to show you a chart in a second that I think will be very, very enlightening and surprising to a lot of you. But so we want to talk about lectins. Okay, so lectins are these components of food that can bind to human tissues, and when they bind to the human tissues, they create this thing called a neo, meaning new, antigen, which is foreign thing to the body that the immune system will react to. Okay, so it's really important to understand how lectins do this. So lectins, the other thing that lectins can do that are really interesting, and lectins are found in a lot of different foods. They're found in a lot of legumes. Okay, so beans. We'll talk about that in a second, but they're also found in gluten. What they can do is they can actually cause in the gut. So before they ever get into the bloodstream, they can cause bacterial dysbiosis or imbalance in people. They can actually cause the gut to become leaky or permeable, which I talked about that in a previous video, which means the gut wall opens up. And then when they cross through the bloodstream, they can directly bind to human tissues. Okay, and when they bind to the human tissues, as I just said, they create a neo or new antigen that is foreign to the body, and the body can react against that. So this is a huge problem with people. I have problems with lectins. So tomatoes were one of the key things for me to remove from my diet that improved my health dramatically. Peppers, all the nightshades were really not good for me at all. So that's how the lectins work. Okay, now this table, you might not be able to see it really well, but I tried to make it take up the whole slide so that if you're on a larger computer, you could see this with a little bit more ease. But let me just explain to you what this is showing. So on the left-hand side of the screen, it shows tissues. Okay, so it shows skin, the mucosa of the mouth, so the mucosa of the mouth, the gums, the stomach. It shows parietal cells, which are cells that line the stomach. Remember I said produce stomach acidity. It shows intestinal brush border. Now these are tissues that we're getting ready to talk about these lectins binding to. Okay, it talks about the colon, mucus lining, connective tissues throughout the body, the thyroid, cartilage, liver, pancreas, kidney, prostate, skeletal muscle, cardiac muscle, breast tissue, pituitary, which your pituitary gland is like your control tower of the brain. It's a very important structure that signals other endocrine glands to carry out their functions. Your eye and also brain, so the myelin sheath of the brain. Okay, these are the tissues on the left-hand column. These columns that you see, these vertical columns, there's wheat germ agglutinin, which is a glutenin that is basically it will bind to tissues. Okay, so lectins and agglutinins will bind to human tissues. Soybean agglutinin is the next column. Peanut, so if you eat peanuts, peanut agglutinin, lentil lectins, and then pea lectin, and then bean agglutinins. Okay, so agglutinins and lectins can bind to human tissues. Remember, they create a neo or a new thing that the immune system is not familiar with. They can, and it can cause autoimmunity and reactivity. So this first column, okay, so you've got all the way to the left, you've got your tissues, right? All the tissues we just went through. The next column is wheat germ agglutinin. So I just look at this. So you see an asterisk in just about every column except parietal cells and pituitary. This is their affinity or their ability to attach to specific tissues in the body. Okay, so wheat germ agglutinin can attach to skin, the oral mucosa of the mouth, the stomach, intestinal brush border, so the lining of the stomach, all these different tissues throughout the body. So if it can bind to that, then it may create this neoantigen and cause reactivity, tissue reactivity against it. Okay, I want you to think about this for a second. This is incredibly important information. Not many people realize this. They don't realize lectins and what lectins do or how they can be dangerous to health. You know, Stephen Gundry, Dr. Gundry has a book called The Plant Paradox, and it's primarily revolves around lectins. I don't follow exactly what he does. What I like to do is test and see what there's reactivity to, and then try to customize a dietary approach. Or I'll try to put people on like an autoimmune paleo diet, which is not like lectin-free diet, but it tends to be a very good. I'll have them follow like our transformation program, which is similar, very, very similar to that, but it follows a diet that people tend to respond pretty well to, and it reduces the overall load of lectins and commonly found inflammatory food proteins if testing is not an option. But there's also, so the next column over is soybean agglutinin. So you can see where the asterisks are beside of every tissue there. I mean, a lot of tissues, less than the wheat germ agglutinin, but quite a few. Peanut agglutinin is found reactive to, or it can bind to a lot of these tissues. You can just see by looking at it. I mean, the P, like the P lectin, is a lot less. I mean, connective tissue, it's shown to bind to that, skeletal muscle, and then also pituitary. So I mean, if you're consuming these foods and they bind to these tissues, you could be triggering autoimmunity against them. So here's how I would approach this, and what I try to do when it's an option, when people can actually do the investigative work, when they can get the testing that's really best, so that we can put together a biospecific plan for them. We do the testing that's needed, and we correlate these things, and we see what's going on, and we try to remove the things that are reactive. We try to heal these barrier systems that I talked about. Once we calm down the immune system, we try to get good immune regulatory function going, which we utilize, vitamin D and vitamin A and glutathione and good essential fatty acids and a lot of different compounds to help try to support their normal biochemistry and their immune system. So this is a really, really important aspect of it. So, if you guys are looking for other resources, I'm going to do a part 2 where I'm going to go into other foods and some other things. You can just go to our website, drbradshuk.com. You can scroll down and click on Learn Our Method. And I've got a video there where I explain the method that I actually use to work this up, the process that we go through. And if you want like free resources, like here on Facebook or on YouTube, you can go there and check out our videos. We have probably 400 videos that you can go through, and try to title them as appropriately as possible to help you find the information that you want quickly. But there's a lot of different resources. If you're interested in like self-help programs, you can go to our thyroidprogram.com. That's a great place for a lot of people to start with dietary, lifestyle, and supplementation guidance. But just please take advantage of those resources, because we've spent years putting that stuff together for you. So okay, so let's talk about any questions that you may have. So I'm going to full screen. Okay, so let's see. Were there any comments? Does anyone have any questions? Let's just take a look and see if there are any. Hi, Donna. Hi, Joanne. Hope you're doing well. Anna, hope you're well. Laura and Fran. So thank you guys for joining. Let's see if there are any other questions here. Let's see, Pleska. So no specific questions to this, and that's okay. That's good. I mean, hopefully we answered most of the questions that you have about this particular topic. There were a few questions that were asked. I tried to answer. So prior to the video, there were a few questions that were asked in a post that I had mentioning I was going live. I tried to answer those as much as I could directly on the post. And there were some things about the virus infection and public health protocols. So I tried to answer that. My office has been closed to the public for, this will be 2 weeks. We did this, we're in North Carolina. We did this, it's not mandated, but until we have testing and we can know who's infected with this, we're trying to do our part to minimize the spread of this throughout the community. Fortunately, I'm in a position where I do a lot of work remotely, do a lot of telemedicine. So we were in a fair position to be able to do that. Hopefully we won't have to do it for all that lengthy of a period of time. But fortunately, I'm in a position where a lot of what I do is remote and video anyway. So hopefully that question was answered. There was a question about vitamin A and vitamin D and different ratios and what people should take. And I really don't know the answer to that. I can tell you that there are a lot of great information out there. There's a lot of conflicting information right now. So doses that are typically found in multivitamins, I think, of vitamin D and vitamin A are perfectly fine to take. there's a book that that I purchased on Amazon, and I think you can still get it until April 1st for $3, and it's unbelievably, the book is worth the book is it's a textbook, but it's pretty easy to understand when you look at the beginning of the chapters. It's by Alex Vasquez. He is he's a DO, so he has medical training. He's an ND. So he's a naturopath. He is also a DC. So he's also has 3 different doctorates. Okay. The guy is one of my favorite people to learn from and listen to. So he wrote this book called Antiviral Nutrition, and he breaks down specifically viruses and 4 different stages of supporting human physiology, the human immune system. And so he talks about vitamin A extensively in the book, and he cites a ton of research. Vitamin A is something that can be taken by most people at pretty high doses. When I work with people that have thyroid dysfunction, I look at their diets and whatnot. I mean, I'll have them take high doses of vitamin A, but I make sure that their vitamin D levels are high as well, because there's definitely a synergistic effect between the two. And there's some evidence that, taking high dose vitamin A without enough vitamin D is a problem. So, I would prioritize vitamin D, but vitamin A is incredibly beneficial. It's been shown in a lot of different types of viruses to be antiviral and to support the immune system and a lot of other physiological functions of the body. I did see where there was a research snippet that talked about, now, pregnant women should not take over 10,000 international units of vitamin A per day. But there were other publications in, obviously, non-pregnant women, but they were talking about taking vitamin A in the 50,000, 100,000 international units daily. And some of the research was very lengthy. Some of it was much shorter period of time. But I think that there's a pretty broad window of safety. However, you don't want to become toxic to it. There are some signs and symptoms of vitamin A toxicity, chapped lips, headaches, a few different things that you can watch out for. But the main thing that I try to encourage people is we just don't want to be nutrient deficient. So I recommend, Designs for Health has something called a complete multivitamin that I take. But I take vitamin D. I take about 10,000 international units of vitamin D. But I know what my blood serum levels are. So I know that for me, vitamin D, especially when I can't get adequate sun exposure, needs to be about, my dose needs to be about that high throughout day to day. Vitamin A, I personally feel comfortable taking it, at about 1,000 or 10,000 international units per day as an adult. And I think a lot of people consider that to be a low dose. That's much higher than the RDA. But at the same time, you have to kind of make those decisions. I think it's perfectly fine to take it at lower doses, and maybe at a higher dose, but it's going to be very individualized, and it's really hard to know because you can't test vitamin A very easily. It's not something that I think is easy to test at all, so or to test accurately. So, I think a great place to start is a good multivitamin and making sure that vitamin D levels are optimal. It's a question I wish I had a better answer for it. So a lot of people have been asking questions too about supplementation, and so I created a video called it was on creating an anti-fragile state of health. Okay, so it's one of the live videos I think I did it about a week ago. You can go to our Facebook page and check it out. Just scroll down. That video, I break down the exact supplementation that I'm currently taking, and it's just to build resilience in the human system. It's not necessarily specific to viruses, though I do talk a lot about antiviral nutrition. But we don't know anything really about this particular COVID-19 virus and antiviral strategies. What we do know is we do have some information on other coronaviruses and whatnot. So what I'm doing is I'm following like a lot of the information I've learned from, throughout my career from different people. But I think Alex Vasquez's work is fantastic with his antiviral nutrition book. It's fantastic. There's a lot of research that's coming out. There's different stages. So I like Alex's work because he breaks down when he talks about viruses. He talks about basically preventing entry of the virus into the system, then preventing replication would be the second stage, and then managing the inflammatory cascade was third, and then managing the cellular systems and human physiology fourth. It's a fantastic model. It's very, very well done. And so I use a lot of his strategies. And so vitamin C is one of the things that people have been talking about. And yeah, for sure. Fran, I take, or I would say this, in our full script dispensary, Fran, I think you should have access to it. It's a full script. You just go to, I can post a link to it. But most people that follow me should have access to it, but you can set up an account under full script under my name. And I have, given access to the full dispensary at full script. So you can search throughout the entire their entire inventory. But I have created folders, specifically antiviral folders. One that I have, number 1, antiviral, is my most up-to-date my most up-to-date antiviral folder. And yeah, you can get a lot of things there, a lot of supplementation. They have a lot of things that are not in stock other places, just because they have a huge warehouse and they carry a lot of physician-only supplements. So people that are part of our transformation program, or people that I've worked with, they have access to that. So you can definitely access that. And if you wanted to join our transformation program, you just go to thyroidprogram.com. If you purchase for $1 the transformation program, and then you can, on the next page, you can actually join the transformation community. And as part of being part of our community and our program, you get 20% off of all the supplements, and then free shipping over $50 at full script. So people save a ton of money doing that, but that's something that you can consider. But you can feel free to just access full script under my account and search and purchase whatever you want to. If you need help or assistance, just let me know and I'll try to help you as much as I can. But hopefully that's helpful. So Fran, you should have access, I think. So let's see. I'll try, guys. If you have questions, post them. I'm getting ready to go eat dinner though, so post them if you got the questions. Fran says, "Can I order vitamin C from you? What brand? Where can I buy vitamin C?" So yeah, so Fran, on full script. And I think it's fullscript.com. I could look it up, but I'll post a link as soon as we're done. I'll post a link before I go eat, and you can go there. And then what I like right now, what I really like, and I probably shouldn't say this because it's going to be a run on it. No one will have it for vitamin C. Is I really like Designs for Health has liposomal vitamin C. And they're doing a pretty good job at keeping up production. So if you buy it and it's back ordered, they're pretty good at their production. And they have great service, and they're working really diligently to keep things in stock. But that's what I get. And so that hopefully, and I think you can just search, like if you go into full script, you can just search liposomal vitamin C, or you can click on Designs for Health and then type in vitamin C and it will pop up, because you can click on the brands and then you can just search through the brand itself. But vitamin C liposomal for Designs for Health is really, really what I like. So let's see. Okay. So there was a question. Do we have to take K2 with D3, or is it okay to take alone? Okay, so first question is I recommend taking them together, like inside of full script. I believe the vitamin D I have recommended is one that has vitamin D and K2. But if you take a multivitamin and you're getting K2, I think you can take vitamin D. I recommended for years vitamin D without vitamin K before we knew more about the relationships. All of the fat soluble vitamins, so there's 4 vitamins: A, D, E, and K. A, D, E, and K all have a relationship. So you don't want to take too much of one, but it's very common, as long as you're getting some of those other fat soluble vitamins, you're eating a reasonable diet. I've never had a problem with people utilizing it or having any kind of issues. But I do typically recommend them together. Also, with gluten, is it okay just to cut down on it, or is it best to cut it out completely? You have to cut it out completely. completely. Gluten is one of those things that you can react to. So per Dr. Vojadani, who is an immunologist, mind you, and this is a researcher, this is someone that researches the immune system, 35 years. I heard him discuss this, and he said, if you have enough gluten to fit on the head of a pin, that's enough to stimulate the immune system. The immune system is extremely sensitive to any of this. Now, I do have a lot of my clients, when they're eating out, I have them take an enzyme. I typically recommend Gluten Flam by Apex Energetics or Serenade through Claire Labs, Klare, because they have DPP4, which is an enzyme that has been shown in like a simulated gut environment, so AKA Petri dish, to thoroughly break down the gluten proteins into their amino acids. So I think it's the best enzyme to take when you're going to be maybe exposed to gluten. But you really listen, if you have autoimmunity against tissues that cross-react with gluten and you have gluten reactivity, you just listen, your life will be better. Okay. You just need to figure out, like, and prioritize it and say, you know what, this is just not worth these health consequences. I need to prioritize my health and just do your best. Okay. But I do recommend people take these enzymes. Like if you're going out to eat and you think you might be exposed, I recommend they take enzymes before and enzymes after to try to sandwich it and make sure that there's plenty of those enzymes. But it's rolling the dice sometimes. I really do think that, and I know that's not what people want to hear, but I just got to tell you what I think the truth is, and that's the truth. So I hope that helps. So let's see. Thank you. Someone said they love the kale chips in the transformation program. They almost, I make those kale chips almost daily. They are awesome. I think that was a recipe that Alicia found. So that was so awesome. Okay, Fran, good deal. Fran says she's going to do that. Hi, Bridget. Hope you're doing well. Let's see what other questions I can take. Can you put a link to Alex's book that's on sale? Chris, I'll definitely do that. I'll post it. What supplements do you recommend for a child on 175 levothyroxine dose? Ireland. Hi, Jane. So that is a really tough question. I will tell you what, I usually with kids, I always, everything that you do, especially with children, I'm extremely cautious. I just want to do the best that I can for everyone. But with kids, I mean, it's something that's like, I've come to this conclusion, like if we don't try to help them, who will? Because I've been very cautious about working with children just because it's such a delicate thing. And I mean, we all love our kids as much as, anything in the world. And it's a really thing. I don't want to make any mistakes with them. And not that I want to make mistakes with anyone, but it's just really, it's just one of those things that pulls your heartstrings. So with kids, I tend to recommend very similar recommendations that I do with adults. A good multivitamin that, making sure that they have with autoimmunity, depending on what's going on with the child, with autoimmunity, which is the most common cause of Hashimoto's, with my adults, I always recommend that they're using selenium. Because it's so important for so many different aspects of thyroid hormone physiology. Selenium's a cofactor for glutathione, which is an antioxidant that helps to reduce hydrogen peroxide that's produced as a byproduct of just thyroid hormone production in general. That's one thing. Selenium's super important. Just a good multivitamin for kids, I think, is a good thing to do to supplement a diet, because most of us, even if we're eating foods that are whole foods that we think are very nutritious, I mean, most of the topsoil, the experts have said, is depleted of a lot of the nutrients. So the foods just don't have the same, there's just not the same amount of nutrition in there. So it's one of those things, like a multivitamin is super important. So multivitamins are important. Essential fatty acids are critically important. So omega-3s are really important. And, I try to get my kids, I get like these emulsified omega-3s. Now, you got to be careful with some of these. Sometimes it's just better to give them like a brand of fish oil that doesn't have anything added. But there are some out there that taste really good. Like, so I use a lot of designs for health products, but there's one that's there. I think it's Omega Avails, but it's a liquid. and it is almost my kids actually like it, believe it or not. So there used to be like I believe it was Barlean's brand, but Designs for Health has some really good ones that have like citrus flavor, ones like key lime pie, but they're really conscious about what they put in there too. So it's not like artificial flavors or food colorings or any of that stuff. But I believe they do use some gums. So like guar gum. I don't know exactly what gum it is. I'd have to look at it. But an example is like guar gum, or there are, what are the other gums? There are numerous other gums. So gums thicken things without them being dairy, but gums can be highly reactive. They can be. They're large molecules that are sticky, so they make things more creamy when you add them. So a lot of like almond milks and rice milk and all those milks that are not dairy, they're dairy replacements. The way they thicken them is by adding gums to them. So that's something that so a good multivitamin. Essential fatty acids are critical for immune system function, hormonal production, brain development, everything. I mean, just hugely important. Okay, so good multivitamin, and then essential fatty acids. I give those to my kids. Making sure vitamin D levels are adequate are important. So I give my kids like a liquid vitamin D that I give them. It's just a dropper, and so I give them like a drop or two of the liquid vitamin D. I believe it's 1,000 international units per drop. It's tasteless. So drop it in, they don't even know. Making sure vitamin D levels are adequate. Let's see. Beyond that, okay, so I really like a supplement by, I don't want to get it wrong. I think it's orthomolecular, okay? It's called D-Hist. So the letter D -HIST. Now it's available in Fullscript. I mean, I know I have it in Fullscript. It's in there, but I believe it's orthomolecular. Unfortunately, in Ireland, so if you're outside of the United States, you can't order from Fullscript. They won't ship out of the country. There's just so many laws with different countries and what you can send in, and there are regulations on different ingredients. But D-Hist Junior is a chewable. My kids actually like the way it tastes too. But it has its main ingredient in there is NAC, N-acetylcysteine. And N-acetylcysteine is a fantastic supplement. And quite frankly, N-acetylcysteine is one of the primary things that Alex Vasquez, in his book, Antiviral Nutrition, he recommends too as well, because it has all these antiviral properties. It's also mucolytic, so it helps to thin mucus. But NAC is used it's just a fantastic supplement. I just could go on and on about NAC, but the primary thing in there is NAC and quercetin, or quercetin, depending on how you want to pronounce it. But quercetin is also being researched a bit for these coronaviruses and antiviral properties. But quercetin, or quercetin again, is also a histamine stabilizer. So it's fantastic for kids that have allergies, because it can actually help to keep the cells that dump histamine and cause all the histamine symptoms, that keeps them stable so they don't release the histamine as easily. But so D-Hist Junior, and it also has bromelain, which is can be effective. It's an enzyme found in pineapple, but it can have some anti-inflammatory properties as well. So those are awesome. I mean, those are, if I had to like give a list of things that I give my kids, I give them primarily those things. So I hope that's helpful. That gives you some guidance. So okay, gluten-free, don't buy a lot. Okay, Nordic, and Joanne says this is a good tip too. So as far as essential fatty acids go, Joanne says my kids take the Nordic Naturals lemon. So that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Joanne. There's a lot of options out there. There's not just like one thing, and there's a lot of different brands. And Bridget says you should be tested for NAC levels first. There can be some genetic issues with glutathione. Bridget, do you know the test that was used with you for testing NAC? Because I haven't done that before with people. I haven't. Maybe you can share a little bit with us about the test that you used. Okay, so please say the name of that again. So Teresa, that is so NAC. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to go through everything. A good multivitamin, Designs for Health, Omega Avail. It's a liquid. They have capsules, but it's a liquid essential fatty acid. Then Third would be a liquid vitamin D, just a sublingual dropper is typically what I use. And then NAC, just the letters N, A, and C, means it's an acronym for N-acetylcysteine. It's a precursor to glutathione. You can just Google it or research it and check it out. Let's see. What else? Were there other questions? Oh, and Joanne mentioned that the oil that she uses is the Nordic Naturals lemon, which is a good one. It's a good one. I've used it before. I used to use it all the time, and it's actually really a very good one. It's they check it for chemical and chemicals, everything. It's very, very well done. So okay, so Bridget, if you get a chance and you can post like any information on the testing for NAC in the comments, that'd be awesome. I'll make sure that people get access to that, and I'd like to research it as well. Let's see. Hypomos, magnesium buffered chelate. Okay. So yeah, so if there's any questions or anything that you guys have, please post them in the comments. I'll do my best to answer them later. But we will continue our series with the second food video. Remember, you can always check these out later. These videos will be in our videos tab, either on YouTube or on our Facebook page or in the Greater Hickory Thyroid Support Group and in the transformation community. These videos will be located in all those places. But you can find them out. If you have questions, please post them. I'll do my best to help you guys out during this time. Remember, we will get through this work on yourselves. Focus on the things that you can control. Surrender to the things that you can't. Just know that we will get through this, and everything will be fine, and we'll come out better on the other end. So I do appreciate you guys so much. Hope you have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you for joining me. I know I'd be a little bit long-winded, but I do appreciate you all and hope you have a fantastic day. Thank you.